My stepson shoved me to the floor at Christmas and said, "That seat belongs to my dad." My wife didn't even look at me, and that's when I realized I wasn't family, I was just useful. My name is Tom Walker. And I hit the floor in front of my whole family on Christmas Eve. Gravy on my shirt, my hips screaming because my stepson Kyle shoved me away from the head of the table and said, "That seat belongs to my dad. Get out." For a second, nobody breathed. Christmas lights blinked in the window. Forks hung in the air. I stared up at Kyle's half-smile and waited for my wife, Linda, to say my name like it mattered. She didn't. She grabbed napkins and started blotting the gravy off the hardwood like the spill was the problem. Not the man on the floor. That was the moment something in me went quiet. Not rage, something colder, something final. Cedar Rapids, Iowa is home. Snowy driveway. Small talk at the credit union. Friday, fish fries at the VFW. I'm 56 and I've lived by simple rules. Show up. Keep your word. Pay your bills early. At our age, your name is your credit. And that's why the chair mattered. It was my father's chair. Old wood-worn arms. A squeak in the back left leg. When he was in hospice, he'd sit in it by the window and watch the parking lot like he was waiting for someone to come home. After he passed, I hauled it into my garage. Tightened the joint, stained it walnut, and repadded the seat. I did it with my own hands because it felt like saving a piece of him. When Linda and I got married, second marriage for both of us. I brought that chair into her split level like it belonged. For years on holidays, it sat at the head of the table. Not because I demanded it, but because that's where the host sits. That's how I was raised. And I'd been hosting more than anyone liked to admit. 2 summers ago, I used a chunk of my savings to redo Linda's kitchen. Solid cabinets, a new faucet, better lighting over the sink, nothing flashy, just decent. Linda cried when she saw it and said, "Now I can have family over without being embarrassed." I believed her. Kyle was supposed to be part of it. Kyle is 32 and built like he still thinks high school football is going to call him back. Broad shoulders, quick temper, the restless energy of a man who thinks the world owes him. He bounced between jobs and somehow always ended up back in Linda's orbit when money got tight. He never called me dad, just Tom. I didn't push it. I wasn't trying to replace anyone. I even helped him when he was younger. Taught him basics. Handed him my old drill when he moved out. Covered a bill here and there when Linda begged me to keep the peace. I figured kindness would come back around. Then Kyle's biological father, Ray, started showing up again. Ray was loud and confident, the kind of guy who acted like he owned whatever room he entered. Linda said he'd been mostly absent when Kyle was a kid. Lately, he'd been making up for lost time, which meant spoiling Kyle and letting Kyle believe Ree was the only man who mattered. This Christmas, Ree insisted on coming to dinner. Linda said, "It's important to Kyle." I said, "So am I." She gave me that tight little smile that meant, "Please, Tom, don't start. Let's just have a nice night," she said. By 5, the house was hot from the oven. The turkey smell sat thick in the air. A high pie box was on the counter because Diane, Linda's sister, baked by buying whatever was on sale. Someone put on old Christmas music, being Crosby, Nat King Cole, the kind my dad used to hum. I made coffee the way Linda liked it, strong and plain. Kyle came last, of course, with Ree right behind him. Kyle slapped Ray on the shoulder and said, "There he is, the man of the hour." Ray grinned at me like I was the hired help. "Smells good in here," he said. "We all pitch in," I replied. He chuckled like, "That was cute." We sat. Plates clinked. "Kid." Someone said a quick prayer. I reached for the carving knife. My dad's old one, sharp and thin in that. So when Kyle's hand snapped out and grabbed the back of my father's chair. "Hold up," he said. I looked at him confused. "What are you doing?" Kyle's eyes were bright and mean. He nodded at Ray. "That seat belongs to my dad," he said, loud, clear, sure of himself. "Get out." I started to laugh like it was a joke my brain hadn't caught up to. "Kyle, don't." He shoved me. Not a playful nudge. A real shove. 2 hands to my shoulder and chest. The chair scraped. My boot caught the rug. My hips slammed the floor and pain shot up my side so fast it stole my breath. Gravy splashed across my shirt and onto the wood like a slap. Somebody gasped. A fork hit a plate with a sharp ping. A kid whispered, "Mom." Kyle stood over me, breathing hard like he'd finally proved something. And Linda, my wife, didn't even look down. She grabbed napkins. She wiped the spill. Her face was calm, almost blank, like she decided this was simply easier than choosing a side. I pushed myself up on one hand, the hardwood cold under my palm. My dignity burned hotter than my bruised hip. I looked at Linda, waiting for a word to hand anything. She kept her eyes on the floor in that blinking Christmas light silence. I understood something I'd refused to see for years. To them, I wasn't family. I was maintenance. So, I stood slow and steady, swallowing the pain. And I walked out into the Iowa cold without saying a single word. My truck door shut with a hollow thump. And for a moment, I just sat there in the driveway, hands locked on, the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me upright. The porch light threw a weak yellow circle over the snow. Behind the window, I could still see the table shapes moving, heads, turning, someone laughing too loud, like laughter could erase what just happened. My hip pulsed like a warning light. At 56, you don't bounce. You feel every year all at once. I started the engine and backed out without looking back. The tires crunched over the frozen slush. I drove with the heater blasting and the radio off because I didn't want a Christmas song lying to me. I ended up at Casey's for coffee because I didn't know where else to go. The place smelled like grease and cinnamon rolls. I sat alone in a booth and stared at the dark window, watching my breath fog the glass. My phone buzzed. Linda. I watched it ring until it stopped. A minute later, Kyle. Then Linda again. I didn't answer. Not because I wanted revenge, because if I opened my mouth, I wasn't sure what would come out, and because I could already hear Linda's tone, soft smoothing, like we could mop this up with an apology and a pie. I drove home my home, at least on paper, to the small ranch house I'd owned long before Linda. 2 bedrooms, a garage that still smelled faintly of sawdust in a quiet that didn't pretend. On the way in, I passed the thin folder I keep on the hall shelf. My papers folder, deed copy, insurance warranties, and a stack of receipts from that kitchen remodel at Linda's place. Menards runs every Saturday for a month. New faucet, new sink, cabinet hinges, a backsplash. I set tile by tile after work, hands cramped back, screaming. I remembered Linda standing in that finished kitchen, hand over her mouth, saying, "Tom, I didn't know anybody would do that for me. I didn't do it to be a hero. I did it because I believed we were building something." Seeing those receipts tonight felt like looking at proof I'd paved my way into a family that still called me a guest. I limped inside, changed out of the stained shirt, and checked the bruise in the bathroom mirror. Purple was already spreading across my hip, wide as my palm. I sat in my recliner with an ice pack and stared at the blank TV. That's when the memory hit me sharp and stupid. 2 years ago, when Linda's kitchen faucet wouldn't stop leaking, Kyle had laughed and said, "That's why Mom needed a real man around." I'd smiled then because I thought he meant me. At 9:47 p.m., my phone buzzed again. A text from Kyle. "You embarrassed my dad. You should have just moved. That chair isn't yours." Then another one. "You're just a guest in this family, Tom. A guest who's overstayed." I read it twice. My hand tightened around the phone until my knuckles ashed. I didn't write back. Around midnight, I tried to sleep. I couldn't get comfortable. Every time I shifted, my hip flared and the scene replayed: Kyle's hands on my chest. Linda's eyes on the floor. The scrape of my father's chair like it was being dragged out of my life. I got up and made coffee strong in plain folders the way my dad drank it. I stood by the kitchen window and watched snow drift under the street light. I told myself, "Tom, it's just a chair. It's just a stupid holiday moment. People get weird. Let it go." But it wasn't the chair. It was the sentence Kyle said out loud that everyone had been treating like an unspoken truth. "You don't belong." At 2:13 a.m., Linda finally texted, "Tom, please." He didn't mean it. He's been under stress. Can you just come back and talk? I stared at that message until the screen dimmed. He didn't mean it. Like a shove is something you do by accident. Like get out slips out when you're tired. Like wiping gravy off the floor matters more than the man who hit it. I set the phone down and rubbed my forehead. Beneath the hurt and the shame, something else started to rise. An old line my father used to say, "Your name is your word, Tommy. Guard it." I'd spent my whole adult life doing exactly that. I paid bills early. I kept my credit clean. I didn't co-sign for people who treated money like a joke. I didn't let anyone put their hands on me and call it love. Just after 6, my phone chimed with a sound I recognized but hadn't heard in years, a credit alert. My stomach dropped before I even opened it. It was from the monitoring app I'd gotten after a buddy at the VFW had his identity stolen. The subject line read, "Change detected." I tapped it with a thumb that suddenly felt numb. My credit score had taken a hit. Not a little dip, a real drop, like someone had kicked my legs out from under me. New inquiry, new account activity. I sat back in the recliner and felt colder than the snow outside because in my world that didn't happen unless something had been opened in my name, and the only people who had access to my information were family. By 6:12 a.m., my phone was buzzing again. Call after call, number stacking up. Linda, Kyle, Linda, an unfamiliar number with a local area code. I didn't answer yet. I just watched the screen light up over and over and thought with a slow, sick certainty. Whatever they did, it finally landed on me. My thumb hovered over the green answer button, but I couldn't make myself press it. Not yet. If I heard Kyle's voice right then, I'd either explode or worse, I'd fold. And I'd been folding for years. The phone finally stopped. Then it lit up again. Linda, I let it ring out. Kyle, ring out. Unknown number ring out. By 6:23 a.m., the call log looked like a slot machine that wouldn't stop spinning. I opened it and my chest tightened. 23 missed calls. Kyle had called 12 times. Linda had called 9. The unknown number had called twice. I tapped Kyle's voicemail first. His voice came through too fast. "Tom, call me back. It's some stupid banking thing. They're acting crazy. Just call me." Okay. The next one was 2 minutes later. Less swagger. "Listen. It's not what it looks like. I just need you to talk to somebody. They said, your name is on something. Just call me." The third voicemail made me snort despite myself. "Okay, seriously, what the hell? They froze my account. I can't get gas. Just fix it, man." Then he slipped the way people do when they're scared. "Dad," he blurted, then corrected himself. Tom, please." All those years, he couldn't spare me a dad. But the minute money got tight, his mouth reached for it like a reflex. I clicked Linda's voicemail. Her voice was shaking. "Tom, please answer. Kyle's freaking out. There's something with the credit union. Can you just pick up, please?" Then the unknown number called again, right on cue, local area code, Cedar Rapids. This time I answered, "Hello, Mr. Walker," a woman's voice professional. "Careful. This is Marcy with Hawkeye Community Credit Union. I'm calling about an urgent matter on your account. Do you have a moment to talk privately? I'm alone. Thank you. We're trying to reach you because there's been a delinquency notice issued on a personal loan where you're listed as the guarantor." I blinked. "I'm listed as the what?" "The guarantor. A co-signer." She said the loan is past due and our system flagged your credit profile. Marcy cleared her throat. "The other party called at 5:30, she said. He said, there must be a mistake that you always handle the bills and that you'd approve whatever was needed to keep the loan current." I felt heat rise behind my eyes. Always handle the bills like I was a service plan. "How much is it?" I asked. She flipped a page. $18,400. Opened 8 months ago. First payment missed last month. Second missed this week. $18,000. That wasn't gas money. That was a truck. That was a whole season of somebody's bad decisions. And this affects my score, I said. Even though I already knew. Yes, she said quietly. Because you're tied to it. That's why you got the alert. I stared at the numbers and thought about every time I'd paid early just to keep that little 3-digit badge clean. At our age, a good score isn't vanity. It's proof you didn't wreck your life. I didn't co-sign anything. I said. There was a pause, like she'd expected that. Mr. Walker, the loan file includes your name and a signature attributed to you. If you believe that signature is not yours, we have procedures. What procedures? We can open a fraud review, she said gently. The fastest way is for you to come in. We open at 8, but I can have someone meet you sooner if you're able. I glanced at the clock. 6:31, I'll be there. I didn't call Linda. I didn't call Kyle. I put on jeans of flannel and my work boots like armor. The air outside slapped my face awake. Snow crunched under my soles. My hip protested, but I welcomed the pain. It kept me honest. The credit union parking lot was mostly empty, the sky the color of old steel. I sat in my truck for a second and looked at my own reflection in the windshield, gray at the temples, eyes tired. I thought about my father's chair, Kyle's hand on it like he had a deed. Then I walked in. Marcy met me in the lobby. A woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a badge clipped to her cardigan. She led me to a small office that smelled like copier toner and coffee. I'm sorry. It's the day after Christmas, she said. I know this is stressful. Just show me, I replied. She slid a folder across the desk. On top was a loan summary, Kyle's name, Linda's name, and there it was, my name typed neatly under guarantor. My stomach rolled. Marcy turned the monitor. Here's the signature page. A scanned document appeared. My signature sat at the bottom in black ink. Except it wasn't mine. It looked close from far away, but the rhythm was wrong. The T had a loop I never used. My last name ended with a little flourish I'd never add. Marcy watched my face. Is that yours? I swallowed. No. She nodded almost sadly. Do you ever sign as Tommy? My throat tightened. Only my father called me that. I haven't signed that name since I was a kid. She pointed at the line. There in shaky cursive was Tommy Walker. My skin went cold. Who had access to your information? Marcy asked softly. I stared at the screen. My wife. Marcy didn't judge. She just opened a drawer and set a form on the desk. This is a statement of fraud, she said. If you sign it, we open an investigation. That can have serious consequences for whoever submitted the paperwork. My phone buzzed on the desk. Kyle again. Marcy glanced at it and back to me. You don't have to decide this second. I looked at the pen, then at the Tommy signature on the screen. I'm not deciding out of anger, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. I'm deciding because my name means something. I took the pen and outside that little office, the credit union stayed quiet, normal, while my whole family started to crack. My first thought was that the shove was the worst part. I was wrong. The shove was just the announcement. The paperwork was the execution. I signed the fraud statement with a steady hand and a sick stomach. Marcy, the credit union rep, slid the form into a folder and said, once we open a review, we can't unopen it. Then let it stay open. I told her. She printed copies, circled a case number, and explained it plain. An investigator would call, and I'd need to provide samples of my normal signature. No drama, just procedure. That made it feel real in a I hated in my truck. My phone lit up again. Linda, I answered before I could soften. Tom, where are you? She said, Kyle can't access his account. Ray's losing it. What did you do? What did I do? I repeated. Why is my name on an $18,000 loan? There was a pause that said more than any confession. Linda, I was trying to help. She whispered. Kyle needed it. He said Ree would cover it. It was temporary. And you signed my name. You would have said no. She said like that explained everything. That's because no is a full sentence, I replied. And my name is not a community resource. Tom, please, she begged. It's just paperwork. Just paperwork. Like vows were just words. Like a signature was just ink. I drove straight to Linda's house. Snow drifted down, quiet and relentless. When I walked in, Kyle was waiting like a bouncer, eyes red and wild. Are you happy? He snapped. They froze everything. I can't even buy gas. Ree was behind him in the living room, pacing with his coat still on. And in the corner, like somebody had shoved my history out of the way, was my father's chair. Moved, exiled. Kyle saw me looking and smirked. Yeah, we moved your little throne. It's my dad's chair, I said. Kyle's laugh was sharp. Your dad's dead. Mine's right here. Ree jabbed a finger at me. You don't do this to family, he barked. I looked at him. Kyle didn't worry about family when he shoved me to the floor last night. Kyle stepped closer, voice rising. You're a guest here, Tom. A guest who overstayed. That seat was never yours. Linda stood in the kitchen doorway with a dish towel twisted in her hands. She wouldn't meet my eyes. That was the part that still hurt the most. Tell him, I said to her, tell him whose name is on that loan. Linda's mouth opened, then closed. Kyle's face shifted, panic, sliding under the arrogance. Mom, he said. She finally whispered. I signed it. I thought it would be okay. Kyle stared at her, then at me like I just pulled the floor out from under him. You told them it was fraud, he said, spitting the word. You made my mom a criminal. I told them the truth, I said. I didn't sign anything. You could have covered it, Kyle shouted. You always cover it. That sentence hit me harder than the shove. Because he was right about one thing I had. I turned and walked out before my temper made a mess I couldn't clean up. In the truck. My hip throbbed with every bump. And for a moment, I wanted to go numb. Call it a misunderstanding. Make a payment. Swallow the humiliation like I'd swallowed it for years. Then my phone buzzed with a new voicemail from Kyle. This one wasn't angry. It was desperate. Tom, listen, he said, breathless like he'd been running. Just tell them you signed it. I swear I'll pay you back. Ray said he's got it. He just needs time. Come on, man. Don't do this. It's embarrassing. Embarrassing. Not wrong, not illegal, just embarrassing. I didn't go home. I went to the VFW. VFW Post 788 isn't pretty, but it's honest coffee. That tastes like it's been sitting since breakfast, and men who don't waste words. Frank Delaney was their 72 retired attorney, the guy who reads the fine print so the rest of us don't get eaten alive. I slid the folder to him without saying much. He skimmed, then tapped the signature page. Tommy, he said. That's not you. No, I said. That's my father's voice on paper. Frank leaned back. Tom, this isn't family stress. This is identity misuse. If you let it slide, it won't stop. Next time it'll be a mortgage, a credit card, your retirement. I'm not trying to blow up my life, I muttered. Frank nodded once. You didn't. They did. All you're doing is quitting the job of protecting them from consequences. On the way out, I stopped by my house long enough to grab a notebook in a little shoe box where I keep spare documents, old statements, IDs, the kind of boring stuff you never think you'll need until you do. I wrote down dates, Christmas Eve, the shove, the calls, the loan, every detail. I even checked my doorbell camera history, not for drama, just because Frank's voice was in my head. Document everything. By noon, the story was already spreading, texts from relatives, friends, even a guy from church. You really doing this to Linda? You're ruining Christmas. Kyle's just a kid. I didn't answer. I saved everything. Then Marcy called again. Mr. Walker, the review is now formal. She said, an investigator will contact you today. Also, Mr. Parker called and demanded we fix it. I wanted you to hear that from me. Not 10 minutes later, a new number rang. When I answered, the voice was calm and official. Mr. Walker, this is Investigator Harlan. I'm on your case. I'd like to meet today. I stared at the gray Iowa sky and felt my jaw set. Kyle had wanted me out of a chair. Now, he was about to learn what happens when you try to sit in a man's name. My meeting with investigator Harlan happened in a plain conference room at the credit union. Beige walls, stale coffee, a stack of forms. He was mid-50s, calm eyes, clipped voice, the kind of man who didn't need to sound tough. He set a small recorder on the table. "Mr. Walker, I'm going to ask questions about the loan file and your signature. You can stop at any time." "I'm not here to stop," I said. He asked me to walk him through Christmas Eve, the chair, the shove, the calls. I kept it at simple times names what was said. Then he slid 3 sheets of paper toward me. "Sign your name 10 times. He said normal signature. My pen moved the way it always had. Tom Walker. Tom Walker steady practiced. Harlan compared it to the Tommy signature in the loan file and didn't pretend it was close. "That's not a match," he said. "No," I answered. "It isn't." He asked who had access to my information. I told him the truth. My wife had everything. We were married. That's what trust looks like until it doesn't. When we finished, he closed the folder. "We'll forward our findings to the county attorney. He said that doesn't guarantee charges, but it can. Be prepared." Prepared? I'd been unprepared for the shove at my own table, but I could handle paperwork. My phone buzzed the second I stepped into the cold. Linda, then Kyle, then Ray. I didn't answer. I drove straight to the VFW. Frank Delaney was their 72 retired attorney reading the paper like the world still made sense. I showed him the case number and the messages. Kyle swung between rage and begging. Re-tried threats. Frank snorted. "Threats don't fix fraud." "I don't want Linda destroyed," I said low. Frank looked at me over his glasses. "Wanting consequences isn't wanting destruction, but once you tell the truth, you don't get to steer the system. That's the cost." The next week felt like Cedar Rapids shrank around me. At church, people smiled too hard. I heard my name in whispers. Linda's sister told someone I was punishing Linda. I kept my head down and saved every text like Frank told me. On January 9th, a letter came with the county seal. Date, time, courtroom number at the Lynn County Courthouse hearing regarding a fraudulent signature and financial responsibility. I called Frank. "It's happening," I said. "I'll be there," he replied. "Wear something decent. Let them see who you are." The courthouse looked like it always does, old limestone flags snapping, steps worn smooth by 100 years of fear and truth. Inside smelled like metal detectors and paper. Linda sat on a wooden bench, eyes puffy. Kyle paced in a suit that didn't fit his attitude. Ray stood beside him, arms crossed, smug like he thought volume was the same as power. Kyle spotted me and took a step, stopped by a deputy stare. "You really doing this?" he hissed. "I'm not doing anything," I said. "I'm answering for my name." Linda reached for my sleeve. Her hand shook. "Tom, please," she whispered. "I'll make payments. I'll sell things. Just tell them it was a misunderstanding." I looked at her, my wife, and felt that old reflex to rescue her rise in my chest. Then I remembered her eyes on the floor while I lay in gravy. I lowered my voice. "Linda, I'm not doing this to Kyle," I said. "I'm doing this for the man. I used to be the one who worked 40 years to have a name that means something." Her face crumpled. She shook her head like she couldn't accept a boundary could be real. The BA called our case. We filed into the courtroom, wood paneling. Fluorescent lights, the judge's bench up high like a reminder. The judge's silver hair pulled tight looked down at the file. "Mr. Walker, you're contesting a guarantor's signature on a personal loan. You claim your identity was used without consent, correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." Kyle's attorney stood. "Your Honor, this is a family misunderstanding. Mrs. Walker believes she had permission." The judge raised a hand. "Belief is not consent. Do you have proof?" Mr. Walker agreed. The attorney hesitated. "No written proof, Your Honor." The judge turned to Kyle. "Mr. Parker, did Mr. Walker agree to co-sign?" Kyle's eyes flicked to Ray. He knew we needed help. He said, "That's not my question," the judge replied. "Did he agree?" Kyle swallowed. Not directly. Marcy from the credit union testified dates the Tommy signature. The missed payments. Investigator Harlan confirmed the signature comparison. Frank sat behind me steady as a post. Kyle's attorney tried one last hook. "Mr. Walker, isn't this about a Christmas argument?" I felt the room lean in. "There was an argument," I said. "There was also a shove. But I'm here because my name was used to take a loan and I never agreed to." The judge nodded once. "Do you have additional evidence regarding intent?" "I do." I said Kyle didn't know I did. I handed a flash drive to the bay. "Audio from my doorbell camera," I said. "Outside Mrs. Walker's home the night of Christmas Eve." Kyle's head snapped up. What he blurted too loud. "Proceed," the judge said. The speaker crackled wind. A door closing, then Kyle's voice laughing like it was all a joke. "The old man's too weak to do anything," he said. Ray's voice followed smug. "He'll pay it like he always does." Kyle added bright and cruel. "He's just maintenance." The courtroom went quiet in the way real rooms go quiet. No movement, no coughs, no pretending. Somewhere behind us, a man shifted in his seat and then stopped like he was ashamed to make noise. Linda covered her mouth. Kyle's face drained. For a split second, I saw the kid in him, the scared one, before the arrogance rushed back in to cover it. The judge clicked the file closed. "That's sufficient," she said. She looked at Kyle. "Those statements show you expected Mr. Walker to absorb a debt he did not consent to. That's intent." Kyle's lawyer started to speak. The judge held up her hand. "No." She turned to Linda, firm, but not cruel. "Mrs. Walker, you placed your spouse at financial risk. This matter will be referred appropriately. There will be consequences." As the BA guided us out, I caught myself rubbing my thumb over my wedding band the way you rub a worry stone. I thought of my father's chair, how it used to creak when he leaned back, watching snow fall through a window steady in his place. Kyle had tried to take my place with a shove. The court had handed it back with a sentence. Outside, cold air hit my lungs sharp and clean. My hips still hurt. My heart still hurt. But I stood straighter than I had in years. Kyle had wanted me out of a chair. Instead, he'd pushed me into a room where the truth had a microphone. The next week, Cedar Rapids went back to being Cedar Rapids, snow piled in gray ridges along the curbs, people hurrying into high 5E with their shoulders up, radios murmuring weather reports like they mattered more than anyone's pain. That's the funny thing about a public moment. It feels like the whole world is watching and then the world goes right back to buying milk. But my world didn't. Linda moved like a ghost after the hearing. She stayed at her sister's for a while. When she did come home, she didn't speak much, just walked from room to room like she was taking inventory of what she'd risked. The house looked the same, but the air in it didn't. Trust once cracked makes even silence sound different. Kyle didn't call for 3 days. On the 4th day, I got a text at 7:18 p.m. "You didn't have to play that audio. You made me look like a monster." I stared at it, thumb hovering. I wanted to write back, "You did that yourself." Instead, I wrote, "You made yourself sound like you sounded." A minute later, he replied, "Ray says, you're dead to us." I read that twice, then set the phone down. My hand wasn't shaking anymore. That surprised me. I didn't feel triumph. I felt something like grief that had finally stopped arguing with reality. 2 nights later, Linda showed up at my door with red eyes and a grocery bag in her hand like an offering. She stood on my porch in the cold shoulders, hunched like she expected me to slam the door. "Tom," she said softly. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. She sat on the edge of my couch, bag in her lap. I noticed she'd brought my favorite crackers and a box of peppermint tea I'd mentioned once. Little details like she finally remembered who I was. "I messed up," she whispered. I didn't answer right away. I waited until the silence made room for truth. She continued, voice thin. Kyle was crying. Ree was yelling. I panicked. I thought if I handled it myself, nobody would get hurt. You handled it, I said. And I got hurt. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I didn't want you to leave, she said. I didn't want to lose my son either. I nodded slowly. So, you picked the option where you could lose me quietly. That landed on her like a slap. She flinched. I'm sorry, she said. I know sorry doesn't fix it. No, I agreed. It doesn't. She twisted the grocery bag until it crinkled. I'll do whatever you want. Counseling payments. I'll sell my jewelry. I'll Linda. I interrupted gentler than I felt. This isn't about money. She looked up confused. It's about me being on the floor and you acting like the spill mattered more than my body, I said. It's about Kyle learning he can shove me and you'll smooth it over. It's about my name. She swallowed hard. I didn't know what to do. You could have looked at me, I said. You could have said my name. Her shoulders shook. She covered her mouth and for a moment she looked like a woman seeing the damage for the first time. Then she said the quietest thing. I didn't want Ree to win, she whispered. So, I let him. That was the truth underneath everything. Linda had been afraid of conflict her whole life, and Kyle had learned to weaponize it. The county attorney didn't throw Linda in jail. She cooperated. She signed statements. She agreed to restitution terms. She had consequences, real ones. Mandatory financial counseling. No more access to my credit. A formal separation agreement drafted by Frank's colleague to protect me going forward. That paperwork felt like a coffin lid. Closing on the marriage I thought I had. Kyle, meanwhile, lost more than he expected. He had to sell his truck to cover part of what he owed. His bank account stayed restricted for a while. The job he'd been bragging about, some warehouse supervisor role, went to someone else when the background check flagged the mess. He blamed me for every bit of it. But he couldn't escape the fact that none of it would have happened if he hadn't treated my name like a napkin, something you use and toss. Weeks passed. Snow melted into dirty patches. February wind kept finding new cracks in my windows. I was living alone in my little ranch house again, the way I had before, Linda. Only now, the silence wasn't lonely. It was honest. One Saturday morning, I walked into my garage and stared at the space where I used to keep the chair when I refinished it. I could still smell the faint wood stain if I imagined hard enough. I thought about going to Linda's and taking it back out of spite. I didn't. Spite would have made it another trophy in a war I didn't want. Instead, I asked Frank to go with me one afternoon, not to fight, just to retrieve what was mine. We met Linda at her place. Kyle wasn't there. Ree wasn't there. Thank God. The chair sat in the corner of the living room like it had been punished for existing. I ran my hand along the worn armrest. The wood was smooth under my palm, familiar as a handshake. Linda stood behind me, wringing her hands. You can take it, she said. Of course, I nodded. I'm taking it home, I replied. Where it belongs. Frank helped me load it into the back of my truck. As I tied it down, the chair creaked once like it was clearing its throat. On the drive home, I realized something. That chair was never my power. It was my memory. Kyle couldn't steal it by sitting in it. He could only shame himself by thinking he could. That night, I made coffee and sat in the chair by my living room window. Snow drifted down again, soft and steady, like Iowa didn't care about anyone's drama. The heater kicked on. The house settled with small familiar pops. My phone buzzed at 10:41 p.m. A text from Kyle. I didn't think you'd actually do it. I stared at the message. There was no apology, no accountability, but there was something new. A crack in the arrogance. I typed back, neither did I, until you forced my hand. A long pause, then another message. Mom's not okay. I closed my eyes. That was the price of truth. Somebody always breaks when the lies stop holding them up. I replied, tell her to take care of herself and tell her I hope she learns peace doesn't come from covering things up. Kyle didn't answer. In March, Linda and I finalized the separation. It wasn't a screaming divorce. It was paperwork, signatures, quiet breaths. She cried. I didn't. Not because I didn't feel it, because I'd already cried on a kitchen floor. No one noticed. On the day the last form was filed, Frank clapped me on the shoulder outside the courthouse. "You okay?" he asked. I looked up at the flag snapping in the wind. "I will be," I said. "I already am in a way." Because the strangest part of all this was what I didn't feel anymore. I didn't feel like a guest in my own life. I went home, made a cup of coffee, and sat in my father's chair in perfect unbroken silence. Not the silence of being ignored. The silence of peace. And I thought about that Christmas table, that shove, that moment Linda wouldn't say my name. I don't hate them. Hate keeps you tied to people. What I learned is simpler and harder. Respect is a two-way street. If you burn your side, don't expect me to keep mine open. If this story hit close to home, if you've ever been told to know your place, if you have ever had your kindness mistaken for weakness, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share this with someone who might need that reminder. And if you want more real stories like this, subscribe and stay with us. You're not alone at the table.